Tonight on the Fifth Chapter. Tonight on the Fifth Chapter, the Blake Griffin era of Detroit Pistons basketball has come to an end. So will the Pistons find a trade partner for Griffin, and is one of Troy Weaver's rookies ready to fill the hole? Another game, another embarrassment for the Spartans. With their NCAA tournament streak in jeopardy and a star recruit decommitting, just how bad could the situation get for Michigan State basketball? And Michigan gives its athletic director a 5-year contract extension. But can he ever be labeled a success if the football program continues to fail? Join the conversation by commenting live on YouTube, Facebook Live, and Twitch. This is the Fifth Chapter with Dennis Fithian and Brian Chapman. He represents the mitten by way of Penn State. When Chapman gets to talking sports, but people can't wait. He represents the mitten. Be a true EMU, but cut Dennis in the fall and his veins bleeding blue. They got respect around the state when that light turns red. So don't sleep on these stews. Just invite your friends to cut your nap short and tip your cap for and sit back for the Fifth Chapter. Brian Chapman. Dennis Fithian. When they open their mouths, they spit in the facts, bro. This ain't even optional, man. You just have to tune into YouTube to watch the broadcast or download it to your phone to peep the podcast. They mix laughter, they get after. It's all captured in the Fifth Chapter. All right, welcome to the Fifth Chapter. I am Brian Chapman. He is Dennis Fithian, ready for episode number 79. And Dennis, I know you've got 2 kids. I don't have any, but I feel bad for them because this pandemic means there's no snow day.
Yeah, don't feel too bad for them. We went out yesterday because we were worried about all the snow today because Fat Tuesday was today, so we got a bunch of punchkis yesterday, but they got to be around noon today, and it was like, hey, the roads aren't all that bad, so they went out for round 2 for punchkis, so double punchkis.
Yeah.
2 days in a row, man.
Double dip isn't too bad. I didn't have a punchki this year, and it's probably too late to get one because today's the last day to get it if today's Fat Tuesday. But
well, you can get in there. There's a name for something on Wednesday. Stale punchki or half price punchki, which brings up.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
My brother is very few. He's old enough to and makes enough money, is what I should say, that he doesn't have to wait till Wednesday to go get punchkis, day-old punchkis at half price. But that is something that he would do. True story. He liked to get the day after Thanksgiving off and then go up to this Irish restaurant or Irish bar that was about a mile from his house. We'd go up there for lunch the day after St. Patrick's Day, and they had like 10 cents, like they would get rid of all the green beer that they had on tap. They would sell it for nothing. So for a couple of years, my brother and I would get dropped off at the the Irish bar.
Yeah.
A day after St. Patrick's Day, man, half off corned beef sandwiches and 10-cent beer. It's the way to go. Now there was nobody else there, celebrating St. Patrick's Day, but.
Well, the problem with that now is that typically St. Patrick's Day and the day after St. Patrick's Day is occurring around the NCAA tournament. So the bar is going to be packed. It's not going to be you, the only one there. At noon, everyone's there to watch games because they're skipping work to make sure their brackets are going all the way and they can get $1 billion or whatever.
Well, it's a great point. You know what? Talk about double dipping. There's a lot of people that love St. Patrick's Day being on that Thursday for Sunday because not only do they get St. Patrick's Day, they get the NCAA tournament. I like it when it's on a Monday through Wednesday. Nice and neat there. You can have St. Patrick's Day, and then you can have the 4 days of college basketball. But not everybody's like me. And this year, I don't think there is a Thursday. I think it's Friday through Monday for whatever reason.
Oh, it is? I didn't realize that. Okay, well, learn something new every day. Well, I can tell you this: we got 5 fantastic chapters that are going to be more exciting than St. Patrick's Day, and we want to thank everyone who is watching via YouTube, watching via Facebook Live, and watching via Twitch. Also, thanks to those who are listening via the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. I did notice that our podcast numbers are up, so a lot more people are starting to listen to the podcast. And if you are interested in listening to the podcast, the Fifth Chapter is available at around 11 o'clock on the day of each show. Make sure that you like, subscribe, and participate in each show by sending in your feedback via YouTube and via Facebook Live. Dennis will be recording. Dennis will be not recording. Well, he'll be reading your feedback throughout the course of the show.
Pop that Facebook up there for some reason. I don't know. Maybe I don't have it right. Maybe I do. Maybe I don't. Let's see.
Oh no, I think you're right. People on Facebook were getting angry, so it should
Yeah,
be
they're
coming
like,
through in a
"What's up with
second.
the fifth chapter?"
Yeah.
All right, there you go.
Yeah, there we go. So if you're wondering what the heck we're going to be talking about during today's show, let's take a look at the book. And in the second chapter, you can see that the Spartans, they are playing right now, but they embarrassed themselves over the weekend against Iowa, and perhaps that translated into a big-time recruit decommitting. How bad are things going to get for the Spartans now that they're hanging by a thread with regards to a chance to get to the tournament for a 23rd consecutive year? In the third chapter, Michigan's athletic director gets a contract extension, perhaps partially because of the success of the basketball program. But what about the football program? Can he really be labeled a success if the football program continues to disappoint? In the fourth chapter, we got some good news. Coronavirus cases around the country are plummeting. Is this a temporary drop, or is it permanent? And are we going to soon see fans in the stands in the state of Michigan? And then in the fifth chapter, we'll try to win you some money with the major wager. But Dennis, we're going to start off with the first chapter, and that takes us to the NBA. That takes us to the Pistons. And it's been an incredible week, because a week ago the Pistons were 5-18. All of their rookies were playing terribly. At least the ones that were healthy enough to play. None of their games were getting canceled. And a week later, they've gone 3-1 since last Tuesday with wins against Brooklyn, Boston, and New Orleans. Sadiq Bey won the Eastern Conference Player of the Week, not Rookie of the Week, Eastern Conference Player of the Week. The Pistons game tonight versus the Spurs is postponed because the Spurs have reported 4 coronavirus cases. The Pistons game tomorrow against the Mavericks got canceled because of a snowstorm in Texas. It got replaced by a game against the Bulls tomorrow. And the biggest news of all is that Blake Griffin is done with the Pistons. He's still on the roster for now, but he and the Pistons have decided that he will not play any more games until the Pistons can work out a trade or a buyout. And by the way, Blake Griffin is owed the rest of his $36.6 million this year and $39 million next year, because we all know he's going to pick up that player option. Dennis, what do you think about the end of the Blake Griffin era in Detroit?
Yeah, well, I think that Tom Gores is going to have to raise the rates on his prison cell cards, because he's going to have to really pick up a big chunk of change there when it comes down to, buying Blake Griffin out. I look at, what confused me at first is like, okay, the Pistons are trying to trade him. They're going to have to attach assets. I'm like, that would be the stupidest thing that I've ever seen. Why don't they just buy him out? Well, they would like to be able to get something in return, like the Heat, which I saw have the best odds if there is a trade, because they have some expiring deals led by Andre Iguodala. And if the Pistons were able to execute a trade, you can. If you look through, you're able to put it through the trade machine. And the idea is the Pistons then would give a couple second rounders to the Heat to take that gigantic contract. They would get some expiring deals, and then they would have this $36 million next year that they could use on players. If they buy them out, that's $39 million is a dead money. Now, if you're a tanker's delight, like thinking
Which
about,
you are.
Well, I think that right now with the Pistons, that's where I'm at. Although the way that they're playing right now, maybe they'll outdo tank status, which is okay. If you got a young team and that's out there, they're gelling, they're playing hard. There's not much like. I'm not going to be angry at Sadiq Bey for going out. Go after it. Score 30 a night, average 25 in your rookie season. Show that Troy Weaver went out there and had an eye for somebody, grabbed him. Could be a potential all-star in the future. All of those things. But you know what? I think that what it's going to be is going to be a buyout, and that's a huge. It's a huge. I'd give Tom Gores credit for doing that, because most people, you're just going to sit there and let him rot on the bench, because you just can't see Eaton. Not only the 39, it's not. They're not even at the halfway point. So you're taking $26 million here too, right? That's a pretty big check you have to cut just to get him out of town.
Yeah. Look, I did see some of the odds about who was favored to make a trade for Blake Griffin, but I would assume that whatever that number is, if that the odds for Blake Griffin just being bought out and not traded anywhere would be a negative number and be negative significantly, like negative 400, because I just don't see any. I don't see much of a value for Blake Griffin. I understand you could say that you could attach some second round picks and take back Andre Iguodala, and that'd be nice for the Pistons if they could get Andre Iguodala. They might have to get another contract from the Heat as well if they want to be able to send Griffin
they'd
away.
have to get like 3 guys, there's Olynyk and a couple other guys, that you could look at.
But like, if I'm the Miami Heat, what reason do I have to want a guy like Blake Griffin, because he's no good, he's got a monster contract, and he can't score? I get that he's got a name, and I get that he's accomplished a lot in his career, but because he's got a name and he's accomplished a lot, and he used to be able to jump over a Kia to win a dunk championship, he's allowed to play 31 minutes per game on a really bad basketball team and put up 11 shots per game. But any other 6'9" big man who was shooting 36.5% from the field would not be allowed to take 11 shots per game. I think that this month ends with Blake Griffin being bought out. He's not going to get the full 50 plus or 60 plus million dollars that he's owed because obviously he wants to get out of there. But I think he'll get most of it, and he'll be able to play fewer minutes if he's playing on a much better team, which should be able to give him a little bit of a boost in production and put less wear and tear on his knees. But like, what there's obviously not going to be a team that's going to be sending any sort of draft pick compensation, even a conditional second round pick in 2023 for a guy whose numbers are really low on a bad team. I mean, he's putting up career low points per game numbers, and that was after last year having a career low in points per game, and he's still missing games with injuries. So this is, if the Pistons can find a way to be done with Blake Griffin's contract after this year, and they can start adding pieces via free agency or whatever, I think that'd be great. But I don't see that happening. The one thing I really hope they don't do is, if they buy him out, which both of us expect to happen, I don't want them to do the stretch provision. They've done that in the past. They did that with Josh Smith. They did that with one other player. I forget who it was. But when you stretch it out, I mean, he's got a really big number. You're talking about paying him or having dead money on your cap for like $10 million a year for like 4 or 5 years in a row or something like that. I would rather just be done with it. You have $40 million less to work with next year to ensure that you're really bad, and to ensure that Dennis Smith Jr., that Killian Hayes, that Bay, that Demboya, that Stewart, that whoever you draft this year are getting all the reps along with Jeremy Grant. And then you've got these experienced players with 2, 3, 4 years under their belt, along with a top 5 pick in 2022 and a whole bunch of cap space to use. I think that'd be the best way to go, as Drake would say, start from the bottom and now you're here.
Yeah, well, you also, the way they're going right now, they're going from 0 to 99. Drake likes that with the young guys that they have. But yeah, you're right. There's no team. Like, we talk about those trade scenarios and attaching second round picks and everything else. But one, I don't want that to happen. It's very unlikely. You're the Heat. You're sitting down there. Yeah, let's get Blake Griffin. No, none of these teams want Blake Griffin unless he's bought out. Then all of them want him. So it was always like that with Andre Drummond too, who's sitting out there and is in a similar position with Cleveland.
Well, I don't think he's in a similar position, because I heard Adrian Wojnarowski of ESPN earlier today say that there is a trade market, a significant trade market for Drummond. He, of course, has an expiring contract, where Blake Griffin is playing much worse and doesn't have an expiring contract. I think that there's a big difference between those two.
Well, I'll buy that. My point was here is that with Andre Drummond and looking at the Pistons, whatever he was making in, $25-30 million, he's a nice player to have on your team if he's not one of the top 4 options for you scoring, or if he's not one of the top 4 paid players. He's a nice player to have on your team. He's just not for the money that he's getting paid. Yeah, I'm sure there is a market if the Cleveland bought him out. I can't see. Well, you're not going to give up a whole lot for Drummond either, because you got to match those salaries too. But like you say, with the dead money, like, that could be something that that the Heat would want to do. But yeah, the 39 next year that you're staring for Blake Griffin, it really does come down to the Pistons. You know what? It's a nice move for Blake, obviously. However much money, maybe he just takes $10 million and says, yeah, that's the part.
He's not giving
You know,
up. He's not giving up all that money and just saying, "Let me get $10 million to get out of here."
Well, I think that's what you can negotiate the buyout, right? Isn't that how you do it?
Yeah, because obviously they can negotiate buyouts, but if he's owed $50 million, I don't think that he's going to say, yeah, you guys can keep 80% of it. I mean, usually the guys that are getting bought out, I mean, most of the time when guys are getting bought out, it's for the remainder of that year and that's it. Like when Reggie Jackson got bought out last year, and they're getting bought out for like 90% of their value. I don't think that that Blake's going to say, just give me 20% so I can get out of here.
No, not 20%. I'm not saying just give him 10. I'm saying it the other way. Like Blake is going to give up 10. Like he'll get,
okay.
Yeah, he'll get 90% of that.
Okay, yeah, that
80 to 90%. That it seems reasonable to me, but but it works out really well for the Pistons that way. You can play all your young guys. They've got this little boost this week where everybody's like, I really like watching this team, and they deserve the credit for how they're playing right now, even if the first 5 or 6 wins, the other teams weren't without, or they were out without one of their stars there. We all saw that, but you know what? It's what they did this week. It was nice. So they should strike while the iron's hot here, and everybody's all right. Hey, we got little Blake Griffin for nothing. Maybe we can pick up a second-round pick after we buy him out, and he goes to the Lakers, and the Lakers send a second-round pick or something like that down the line. Oh, that would be great.
Mr. Irrelevant.
Well, it'd be great. I know, but not having him and handicapping the team next year and putting him $40 million in the hole.
Yeah.
Now that's tanking. That's going in thinking. That's going in saying, hey.
Yeah.
We're zipping towards the bottom.
Yeah, well, he was helping them to tank this year because of how poorly he was playing. But this really does open up things for the building blocks of the future, because with Griffin out of the picture, it now opens up more playing time for Saddiq Bey, who won Eastern Conference Player of the Week. Not Rookie of the Week, Player of the Week. Now, I don't think he deserved it. I don't know how you can make a case that he actually deserved it. I don't know how these voters gave it to him. He had a 30-point game against the Celtics, which is nice. Now, if he had backed that up with a 30-point game against the Pelicans, or he had a 30-point game against the Brooklyn Nets, or just another 30-point game, that's fine. But that was his only game above 16 points of the 4 they played last week, which is kind of surprising. Now, he's been drilling all these shots from downtown, 15 to 23 and all that, but I mean, it's hard for me to imagine that nobody, not Bradley Beal, not anybody in the Eastern Conference, played better than Bey for the entire week. That said, this was a good week for Saddiq Bey, and was a good week for Troy Weaver in terms of his acumen as a drafter, because last week and throughout most of the season we've been saying, well, when are these guys going to step up? When are these guys, the 3 first-round picks, is anybody going to do anything this year? We had last month looking through that Yahoo Sports top 10 rookies list, and none of the 3 Pistons rookies in the first round were there. I don't know if Saddiq Bey after 1 week is going to get into the top 10, but I wouldn't be surprised to see him at 8, 9, or 10. And now with Griffin out of the picture, Bey has an opportunity to start, and if Coach Casey says, I don't know about starting you, well, first of all, he started him already, and number 2, Saddiq Bey could say, in terms of individual awards, I'm the most accomplished player on the team this year. Additionally, you got Jahlil Okafor, who's out right now with an injury, and you got Mason triple-double Plumlee in there, but Isaiah Stewart is going to be able to pick up more of those minutes with Okafor out. He has been. He actually started a couple of games ago. He had 17 points against Indiana, 3 blocks against New Orleans, an opportunity for him to step up. The big problem is you're still waiting for Killian Hayes to come back. He had those 7 horrendous games. He's not going to be back until next month. Dennis Smith Jr. has played, 3 games so far, and he's topped out at 9 points. He had a donut in one of those games. You'd like him to step up with the opportunity, but certainly in the front court, you look at the second 2 first-round picks that Troy Weaver made, this is an opportunity for them to take the shackles off, to take the handcuffs off, and say, all right, let's go see what you got. And so far, for at least a week, Bey is proving that he belongs in this league.
Tell you what, FSD likes it. On Valentine's Day, he's our Bey. He's your Bey.
Yeah.
Hashtag we're on Bey Watch. I mean, it's all over there. They're loving that, and they should. We love when you get involved in the show by throwing your feedback up, whether you're on Facebook, Twitch, or whether you're watching it on YouTube in the live chat. You ready for some of the feedback?
Let's bring it.
All right, let's see. John Dubb is first up here, and he says, it's a waste. We have a superstar. I think he's quoting Goris when they got Griffin. Remember that? He was on the floor. We got our superstar.
Mm-hmm.
Well, such a stupid trade, J-Dub is saying. Go ahead.
Well, no, I was going to say, you look at the Blake Griffin era, and it was a waste. Stan Van Gundy made that trade. I was one of the few that liked the trade at the time because I figured, hey, teams are trying to win championships with a big three. You need 3 All-Stars. Andre Drummond had been an All-Star for the first time recently. Blake Griffin, while he had an injury history and still has injury problems, was an All-Star. And I remember after they made the trade, I went up to Stan Van Gundy before one of the games and said, hey, you need a big three to compete for a championship. Are you going to try to make another deal before the deadline? Because they made the deal like 3 weeks before the deadline. I said, you're going to try to make another deal before the deadline to get a big three? And he said, well, I think we're doing just fine with 2. And obviously that wasn't the case because the Pistons never made the playoffs with Blake Griffin in the Stan Van Gundy era. Then they made it one time with Dwayne Casey. And surprise, surprise, the last week of the season, Blake Griffin got hurt. He played hurt in the playoffs, and they got swept. And the last 2 years have been a disaster. But they shot their shot. SVG shot his shot, and he was way off. And the Blake Griffin era ends with really nothing. Very disappointing.
Yeah, you got to remember, like, you have to have an owner that understands what's going on there. I thought that it was worth making the deal too, because Goris, like, if I would have been in charge, I would have said, hey, this should be a rebuild. They're not going anywhere with Andre Drummond and whatever, Tobias Harris, everything. The upside here is a 7 or 8 seed. It's just not working. You need to go towards the bottom and you try to rebuild with a bunch of young players, which they're trying now. But they weren't going to do that. So knowing that, I like that they went after Blake Griffin. It was so dead. Like, nobody was interested in the Pistons, and then they made a deal for Blake Griffin, and it was exciting for about a week and a half. Then it kind of leveled off, and but Blake, he did work his tail off. He was a fun player to watch, but. Yep. He just made too much money, and I always thought like the reason of to get him. And again, I would have said no, let's rebuild. But if they were going to look to take a swing for somebody or take their shot, like you said, they took it. And then if he was going to get hurt, then it was like, hey, that would be like a natural tank because they're not going to win a whole lot of games if they didn't have Blake Griffin, which you saw at the end. He wasn't there for those first 2 games against the Bucks. They would have got swept anyways. But yeah, here it is now. Now Goris is understanding. It's just taken a couple years for Goris to kind of get it. Like no, that's not your superstar. No, a playoff push for an 8 seed. You're not selling that. You can sell that to about 10% of the dopey fans, but for the most part, people are looking at you. And now's the time to do it. They don't have any fans in the stands. They've got a smattering right now. They can open that thing up and say free tickets, and nobody's filling that place up for a year or 2. So now is the time to do that. All right, more on the feedback here. Beth says it's a bad move by SVG. Is this worse than the Josh Smith deal? Seems like they paid Smith for years.
Well, yeah, it was a bad move in hindsight. I think everybody agrees that in hindsight it was a terrible move. Was it worse than the Josh Smith trade? Josh Smith was never good. At least Blake Griffin made an all-star game and led the Pistons to the playoffs one year. Josh Smith came to the Pistons and it seemed like he just forgot how to play basketball immediately. And he seemed like he was bad for the locker room. So, no, it wasn't worse than Josh Smith.
I agree with you on that. I would take whatever the Pistons offered me to get the hell out of the LCA. That's from Jelinek. It's good to see him on the chat there. That's our intern that you saw on one of the shows last week. He mentions that Purdue is beating Michigan State 30-27 at the half. All right, let's go over to the YouTube live chat, which is jumping right now.
Mm-hmm.
And let's see here. Key says, I can't see how a trade is possible with Blake with all the money involved. I only see a buyout coming. Too bad you can't eat some of the salary when you trade a guy like baseball.
Yeah, I mean, the way you eat a salary is by taking salary back, and the salaries have to match within 25%. So I guess the Pistons could take like up to 25% more than the $36.6 million that Blake Griffin is worth this year, which would mean that they could take up to $45 million in salary. I don't see why they should be averse to that if there's a team that's willing to give up $45 million in salary, if it's all coming in expiring contracts, or if most of it's coming in expiring contracts. But
like even if it's not expiring contracts, if they were bad players and bad contracts for 2 years, you might think about doing that. Like if one of the players was young and you thought maybe had some upside there that you might be able to get something through, or get something out of, maybe, but
yeah, it's
that possibility. Keith adds another reason why I hate Stan Van Gundy and hated seeing him last night. If I would have been there in person, I would have thrown a shoe at him. I think he's joking.
He let the Pistons beat him. You should thank him.
Let's see. And Keith saying, I don't think it can get any worse for MSU, which is a nice foreshadowing for Chapter 2.
Yeah, let's turn the page to the second chapter.
Yeah, that gets us to the Spartans, who are down 3 at the half at Purdue. As you remember the first time, that was the roughest game this season for the Spartans when they had the Boilermakers, ended up losing that one at the half. But they lose a 5-star this week. They got rolled over the weekend in a humiliating loss at home to the Hawkeyes. Izzo's just sitting there on the sideline. So where are we at here, Chap, with MSU? What's left for Tom Izzo's Spartans?
Yeah, it was interesting. I was watching SportsCenter before the show, and they were talking about how this was almost like a must-win for Michigan State if they want to make the tournament. And he's made the tournament 22 consecutive years, but the Spartans are in big trouble. To go out, obviously there's nothing they could do, or not much they could do, about how they had the coronavirus outbreak on the team, and so they had to not play for 20 consecutive days. But when they came back, they got bombed by a couple of teams on the road, and they couldn't win until they got Nebraska. And I think to this point, the only team they've beaten since returning from their Rona break is the Nebraska Cornhuskers, the worst team in the Big Ten. Oh no, they beat Penn State. So they beat 2 out of the 3 or 4 worst teams in the conference since returning from their Rona break, and they weren't, blowout victories either. And today, for those that are watching the game, you got a couple of guard issues. Obviously, Foster Loyer has been terrible since he stepped foot on campus, but now he's got a shoulder injury. He did not start. I don't know if he played, but I saw the first few minutes of the game, and he wasn't playing. Rocket Watts has the flu, and he did not start the game. I don't know if he's going to play at all either, and they were going with A.J. Hoggard as their starting point guard. But things have just completely fallen off the rails for Izzo this year. I've been wondering about that point guard position for the last couple of years, because with Cassius Winston as a junior and Cassius Winston as a senior, I kept on thinking, well, Izzo's got to do something, because he can't just hand the keys to the team over to Foster Loyer. And he tried that at the start of the year, and it was just an absolute disaster. Now Foster Loyer's a junior. He flat out sucks. Izzo, for some reason, never recruited a better point guard than Loyer, unless Hoggard is going to turn out to be better than him by the end of the year. And typically point guards on the Spartans have been not just stars, but leaders of the team. And it's not just Cassius Winston. You can go back to Drew Neitzel, go back to Mateen Cleaves, all these different stars and leaders for Michigan State basketball. So many of them have been point guards, and right now the point guard is the worst position on the team. And so I think that's a huge reason why the offense has been so problematic, and the team has been so problematic. And I can't speak to what happened
I would agree with you. Kithier and Loyer, those guys were misses, and then it just shows you how fragile. an elite, I can call it a blue blood college basketball program, and then they hit a slide just like this, and you're just like, man, look at these recruits. And then you get Enoch Boyaki, who was this 5-star frontline player, and he jumps ship and decommits and says the reason for it is that he was looking at the roster, something like, playing time was a big issue for him, and everybody's looking like, wait a second,
a log jam in the front court.
There's no log jam.
Yeah.
You're the only guy there, so that's how quickly. And when the Spartans, when Amani Bates, goes to the pros, this thing, that's how fast. I think they can hope that Lawyer and somebody else looks to transfer. I mean, I think that's the position that they're in right now. But yeah, you know what? Watching that center, I was over the last 25 years. I would see Tom Izzo, and Tom Izzo's a great coach and everything, but seeing him, going out on the court, bitching at the referees on every single call. If you're a Spartan fan, you're like, yeah, that's working the refs, and you get that. But if you're not a Spartan fan, it's like, get this little son of a bitch off the court, tired of this hothead. But you know what? Saturday, just seeing Izzo just sitting there in his chair, not jumping out, not working the refs. It was pretty sad.
Well, he said that he did not see that coming, and he didn't know really what to do. And I think that we can all look at the roster right now, and we can say, like, what do you expect? I looked before the show, and I was trying to see, well, who's who are NBA scouts saying is going to be, NBA potential on this Spartans team, and I was thinking, probably nobody. And at least according to NBADraft.net, Gabe Brown is the only player who might get drafted. He's number 49 on the NBADraft.net big board. He's the only player from the Spartans in their top 100. Now, I get that sometimes you don't have a bunch of lottery picks or even one on your roster. I get that sometimes you don't even have a first-round pick on your roster, but only one of the top 100 players, that's a problem. And I think that's why Michigan State they're going to have trouble getting into the NIT at this rate.
Oh, I agree with you. When you start taking a look at the numbers, they might not get into the NIT. I think the other thing here, and Izzo, since he was a Hall of Famer, he had the 2 years of the 2 blunders in the NCAA tournament where, Giddy Potts, like, he's the only coach in America that wouldn't have called a timeout until it was like 15. It was a 15-2 start by who was that? Giddy Potts' team.
Is that Middle Tennessee State?
Middle Tennessee State, yeah, there it is. And they had to get up 15-2. Like, you wouldn't do that in a regular preseason game against Marathon Oil, and he's doing it here in the first round of the NCAA tournament. Then he had his lottery pick, Jaron Jackson, benched against Syracuse, playing some walk-on instead, and then they beat Duke, and he seemed to get it back. But you know what? Speaking of walk-ons, Xavier Tillman was a walk-on, preferred walk-on for the Spartans, and there were a lot of people that said, hey, what about the nepotism, with bringing your son aboard as a walk-on? And Izzo was like, he didn't deny it. He's like, yeah, you know what? I've worked really hard, and so I want to be around my kid. When you do that and you're putting your kid with your name on a team when he doesn't deserve that, other players are looking around like, oh, yeah, we got to bring Izzo aboard here just because, Tom wants to hang around with his kid. You can say, hey, he's just a walk-on. What does it matter? Well, Izzo used a walk-on, in place of Jaron Jackson in the NCAA tournament. Xavier Tillman, who's to say? You could have gone out there. Maybe you should have taken a walk-on point guard. Could have been better than Hoggard, certainly better than Lawyer, and a better fit than Watts right now. But maybe that nepotism catching up to Tom Izzo as well.
Well, I don't think that the big issue with Tom Izzo is that he didn't hit on a walk-on and that Steven Izzo is clogging up the roster. They're missing multiple players from a Final Four caliber team. And if you're a Michigan State fan, you can't just sit around and say, well, at least we got Imani Bates coming in a couple of years, and
maybe,
and perhaps Enoch Bouyakie or whatever will change his mind, or perhaps there's another opportunity for somebody to take Bouyakie's spot on that roster. Like, you got to be thinking, what has Izzo done the last couple of years that's led to this, and are we going to be able to put together a championship caliber team or a top 5 in the Big Ten caliber team next year? Now, if Imani Bates is able to reclassify and go to Michigan State next year, that would help. But I also wonder, given how bad the Spartans are right now, is if Bates is gonna reclassify, is he thinking, well, let me go to Michigan State, or am I gonna go somewhere else? Could he decommit just like the Canadian guy Enoch Buyake? In addition, he might look at what's happening in the G League. If Jalen Green ends up getting drafted number 1 or 2 or even number 3 overall, and that other guy Kuminga gets drafted in the top 3 or 4, and Bates is watching on TV with his parents in Ypsilanti, they might say, hey, you know what? Instead of going for this bottom feeder Spartan team, why don't you go make some money in the G League, because it certainly worked out pretty well for those guys.
Yeah, I think the big thing with Bates is if he's going to be able to profit off his name, image, and license. And 1 year of college is awesome. Except when you can go to the G League and get probably a $50 million shoe contract. Certainly get paid $100,000 in the G League, and you go to college. You get your scholarly for a year, and you
got to go to class.
You go to class, players. You get some food. At the training table and everything else, but you're not. If they don't have the NIL there, he's leaving an awful lot of money on the table. I know nobody is. I don't think signing shoe contracts in the G League, but Amani Bates is the biggest star his age since LeBron James. I mean, everybody says that. Every person out there. So I think he could. I think he's he goes to the G League and he make $50 million. Yeah.
Well, I mean, what's a bigger brand? I think that's one thing you have to wonder, is playing for the Fort Wayne Mad Ants or the Grand Rapids Drive a bigger brand name than Michigan State? As of right now, that answer is no. And I think, don't they have like a special G League team for like stars, like the G League Select? I don't think that the guys like Jalen Green and Jonathan Kuminga are just playing for some random team. So if that's the case, that might change things up as well. But the bottom line is, like, this year is a disaster. Perhaps Michigan State can go 500 down the stretch in Big Ten play. I haven't looked at the remainder of their schedule, but Izzo needs to come back with a vengeance next year if he wants to hang with the likes of Michigan. And you see how strong the conference is right now, with 3 teams in the top 5 in the nation. And it's not like these teams that are in the top 5, talking about Michigan, Ohio State, and Illinois, and obviously these other teams that are ranked, are loaded with one and done players. A lot of these guys from the Big Ten are going to be coming back next year. So they're going to be veterans to face this sorry Michigan State squad. Izzo, he has the ability. He's done it in the past, but he's going to have to turn things around with a vengeance in the 2021-2022 season.
Yeah, go out there. Like, we know that he's made the NCAA tournament for over 20 years, so we know this won't be a spot he's familiar with, but he's going to have to go out there and look at that portal, look at the transfers, grad transfers, and bring a couple guys in. Hopefully, like I said, there'll be a couple guys that'll transfer, so he'll be able to go out there, because they don't have any scholarships right now. If Lawyer and Kithy are like, no, we want to come back and play for the green and white. Okay, Come on back. That'll be fun.
Yeah, it's amazing to me that he has not been able to find anybody at the point guard position that prevents Foster Loyer from even getting a minute on the court unless it's a blowout. What kind of feedback are we getting on the Spartans?
This one is from Brian, who says, Izzo and the Spartans need to take that L, take one out of Coach K's playbook, and talk about how this year doesn't matter. With that, we can see how important Cassius Winston was for the team. Rocket Watts needs to publicly thank Cassius for every month for the rest of his life. Winston saved him and the team so many times. In the Spartans' last 5 games, Rocket Watts has 3, 4, 5, 8, and 6 points. Sheesh! That's
he's not doing anything.
Brian.
Nobody's doing anything on the Spartans.
Yeah.
When you watch Michigan State basketball, who gets you excited?
Lawyer.
I bet. Yeah, if you hate Michigan State basketball because you want to see him on the court, like, yes, go out there, Lawyer, commit a turnover, throw up a brick. Go walk underneath the center's legs because you're so small. Yeah, there's nothing.
Izzo got in there against the Hawkeyes on Saturday. I liked it.
I bet you did, because they were getting blown out.
Yeah, I was cheering for him. All right, let's turn the page.
Yeah, let's turn the page now to the third chapter, and this is, of course, right up your alley as you're a big Michigan fan. Um, in the third chapter, we get to a contract extension, and we're not talking about the one that folks have been talking about, at least for most of the last 6 months, Jim Harbaugh. He eventually got his contract extension last month because, well, nobody wanted him in the NFL. But there was another contract set to expire before Harbaugh's, and it was athletic director Ward Manuel's deal. That was set to expire next month in March, but he reached an agreement on a 5-year extension that will keep him in Ann Arbor through 2026. The deal set to be approved by the Board of Regents on Thursday. Manuel came to Michigan in 2016 after Harbaugh's first season ended, and in that time, he's done some good things. He hired Mel Pearson, who took the hockey team to the Frozen Four. In 2019, the Michigan baseball team became the first Big Ten team to go to the College World Series since Indiana in 2013. And he hired Juwan Howard, whose men's basketball team is third in the country. But obviously, most Michigan fans care more about the football program than they do all those other teams and the rest of the teams combined. And Michigan just finished their most successful season against Ohio State in recent years because they didn't play them. But they went 2-4 in the games they did play. And they haven't won a Big Ten title under Harbaugh, haven't beaten Ohio State under Harbaugh. So the question for you, Dennis, and for the people out there who are watching and listening to the fifth chapter is this. Can Ward Manuel, the athletic director for Michigan, be viewed as a success if the football program doesn't succeed?
Yeah, I would just look at it like this. I think the easy answer is no. Like you've got to get it right with football. If you just look at the revenue sports, football and basketball, I bet at Michigan, I could be wrong on this number, but I bet 90% of their revenue is football related. You know, I know they get the deals with the Big Ten Network, and that ties in with basketball and everything else for the $40 or $50 million. So maybe you could split that number up and say it was like 75-25. But we know that 110,000, compared to 15,000 for the Chrysler Center, and that's big time money. So you got to pack that stadium. And yeah, Ward Manuel, it's nice to have all that other stuff in your back pocket, because now that he's kicked the can down the road for another year with Jim Harbaugh, he can say, yeah, look, hockey, baseball, everything. Look at basketball. It's great, having Juwan Howard, do what he's doing right now. Like he looks like, that was the greatest hire in the world. And remember, the Ward Manuel was going with a guy he had connections with at Providence, Ed Cooley, who it was him and Juwan, and Cooley at the last minute pulled his name because he got a bigger contract at Providence. Maybe the Wolverines would have ended up hiring Ed Cooley there. So we don't know. But the Juwan Howard hire was great. But yeah, he's got to get it right with football. I mean, if Michigan limps to a 6-6 season, and then he has to go out there and hire that next guy, his legacy is going to be whoever he hires next after Harbaugh, or unless Harbaugh has this miracle sports turnaround. A lot of Michigan fans, I don't know if they're expecting that. Of course, they're hoping for it, but I think it would be that next hire for Michigan football, or Ward Manuel, and it's going to be tough. Look how tough it is. Like they just said to Jim Harbaugh, yeah, go out and do whatever you want. See if you can get any interest from the NFL. Kind of put yourself out there and leave the football program in limbo, which you did for over a month, and then you couldn't get the time of day. All right, we'll give you an extension, but we'll be able to get rid of you after 1 year. So that was a long answer to say that, it's all about football.
Yeah, it is 100% about football. I mean, you talk about if Michigan has a 6-6 season. I mean, think about this. If Michigan basketball goes to the Final Four, or if Michigan basketball wins the national championship and Michigan football goes 6-6, what are Michigan fans going to want to talk about? They're not going to want to talk about, can Michigan basketball go back to back. If you want to talk about what's more important to them, they're not going to talk about, well, who's the big time recruit coming down the pipeline in basketball. They're going to say, all right, who's the new coach? Get Harbaugh out of here. We need to start J.J. McCarthy. Donovan Edwards needs to turn things around. Let's get the hype machine going. All these things regarding football is what people are going to care about. Either Michigan football starts winning the Big Ten and beating Ohio State, or Ward Manuel cannot be considered a success. When the softball team went to the World Series, it was nice, but could anybody name a player on that roster a month later? No, unless you were a family member Same with the baseball team. They went to the college baseball World Series. Could anybody name a player on that team? No. Now, can you name players on the basketball team? Yeah, because it's a revenue sport. You see them on TV. Everybody knows Trey Young, or not Trey Young, Trey Burke and Tim Hardaway Jr. Took them to the national championship game. Things like that. But yeah, college hockey, most people don't even know how to find college hockey on TV, if it's even on TV. Sometimes it'll be on FSD, sometimes it'll be on BTN, but people don't, hockey's the fourth most watched sport in terms of the pro levels. In terms of college, I can't name a single college hockey player. And then you look at when Michigan was going to those national championship games under Beeline, even when they were getting there, the commentary or the course of the conversation with regards to Michigan fans after they lost the championship game wasn't, all right, we've got to bounce back. We've got to get these recruits to turn things around really quickly and step up so the Beeline can get that next step and get the championship. Michigan fans were saying, hey, it was a nice season. We'll see how things happen next year. And I'm not going to think about Michigan basketball again until late January, the first time we play MSU. Michigan football fans don't go that long without thinking about Michigan football. What fans care about is football 10 times more than any other sport or every other sport combined at Michigan. He has to get that right.
Yeah, I think, you know what, I've always thought about it like this. I'll go back to the capacities on the stadium, like for interest. If you look, like, you know what, there's a couple thousand at softball. You look at softball's a jewel, and, you know, what baseball this year was fantastic if you were a Michigan fan. So, like, people that really like those sports, those things are awesome. But, you know, you might have 1,000, you know, maybe at basketball, you might be able to draw, 12, 13,000 at the Chrysler Center. I think that's the capacity. Maybe it's 15. But, football's 110,000. That's the interest. That's, that.
And there's no empty seats.
That's it. And there's a waiting list. And, football's king in America. There's no doubt about that. It's like that in Southeast Michigan. It's not like that everywhere. But in the Midwest and in Ann Arbor, it's definitely like that. So, yeah, football, those other things are all nice, but 90% of the fandom there, it's going to be football driven.
Now, if somehow, some way, Michigan basketball can become like Kentucky or Duke in basketball, I still don't think that he could be labeled a success if football isn't succeeding, but he could prevent himself from becoming a failure. Now, there's nothing that I think can erase going like 0-10 over the next decade against Ohio State. And having Michigan fans say, oh, gosh, we just finished another 8-win season. But if Michigan basketball became like Kentucky or Duke, and then by July of 2026, I think there would still be more fans wanting to talk about the quarterback battle than who Juwan Howard got on the recruiting trail. But Kentucky and Duke, not only are they typically, not this year, but typically among the top 10 teams in the country, among the teams that are talked about most on SportsCenter, but they also have guys that are getting drafted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the draft. You look at all those Beeline teams, Burke and Mo Wagner and Tim Hardaway Jr., if they were getting drafted in the first round, it was deep into the 20s. If not, it was in the second round. If you can get the kind of buzz that Kentucky and Duke are getting, that could offset it a little bit, but only by so much, because by the time football season starts, Michigan fans are not even going to be thinking that much about their number 1 or number 2 ranked preseason basketball team. They're going to be thinking, let's win a Big Ten championship finally in basketball. In football, not go 9-3.
All right, Keith has a lot to say here on the live chat. I care more about Michigan basketball than football. I don't know why so many, non-U of M'er fans think that all fans like football better than basketball. I think that U of M'er maybe just
well, it's not all, but it's the vast majority. The vast majority of fans who are Michigan fans only care about Michigan football. Now, there's also a big chunk that care about some of the other sports, particularly basketball. But I would say over 70% of people that consider themselves to be Michigan fans only care about football.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Keith says football's mostly been disappointing in the 21st century, not to mention all the years before that. They go out to the Rose Bowl and lose. Put it this way, college basketball playoffs way more exciting than fake college football playoffs with 4 teams. I enjoy college basketball. Keith says Big Ten football is boring. You're wrong, chap.
Well, I don't agree that Big Ten football is boring, but I understand what you say when you talk about Michigan football being a disappointment and Michigan basketball not being as disappointing recently. But it's about how much you care, how much care you have about the particular team, and people have not cared enough or as much about a winning program as they have cared about a decent program when it comes to Michigan football. And that's why it's important for them to get it right.
Yeah, I just see it. Football is up here, and I like football, basketball, hockey, and baseball. Those are my 4 favorite sports. But when it comes to talking with people in Southeast Michigan, I mean, football is it's just. But maybe it's because we're in sports talk, just 10 times more popular than all of those sports, combined.
Yeah, and I mean, I went to a football school as well, Penn State, and for me, like I like watching Penn State basketball. I like watching Penn State women's volleyball, but Penn State football is number one. And oftentimes, people that aren't Penn State fans will text me and say, "Hey, are you watching the game?" And I won't even know that Penn State basketball is playing. And that's the case for a lot of my friends. That's what happens when you go to a football school. Michigan's the same thing.
Yeah, or if you go to a county that's in a football, like in Eastern Michigan's in Washtenaw County, man. I was like, hey, that's football county. Does that make it work?
Yeah, because everybody loves the Eagles football program, don't they?
No, but if you're in Washtenaw County, you can say, hey, what's with Washtenaw County? It's Eastern and Michigan, so you're a Michigan fan too.
Everybody in Washtenaw County thinks that the Eastern Michigan and Michigan football programs are right on par with each other. Yeah.
I guess we are discussing Warren Manuel, and I really don't care if he succeeds or not. That's from Keith. It's fair. That's fair enough. We're ready to turn the chapter.
All right, let's turn the page to the 4th chapter.
All right, and we get to something that we have. How long have we been doing this show?
This is episode 79. I think our first official show was in May. So
it scans the pandemic.
About 9 months. Yeah.
And if you look at
the pandemic is what caused this show, you could argue.
I think that would be a good argument. And COVID right now, though the cases are in decline, Chapman, you follow this as much as anybody else out there. Are we out of the woods?
Well, I wouldn't say I follow it as much as anybody else out there, but
It's Fauci, Chapman, various people on Twitter. That's kind of the way I look at it.
I'm going to have my own press conference tomorrow at the White House. No. Look, the numbers have been getting better, and that's actually been a pretty significant story. Now, obviously, this week there have been some other national news stories like the president getting acquitted and these monster snowstorms across the country that are kind of taking up some of the volume, or taking up some of the energy, and talk about trying to pass a coronavirus bill. But on Monday, the United States reported 58,300 new cases approximately, and that's the lowest one-day total since October. And it's well below the peak of 200,000 cases per day that we saw in January. And I was looking at the Michigan numbers, and the 7-day average is about 1,100 per day, and that's the lowest since early October. So we're talking about 4 months ago. But those numbers are still above the spike that we saw in the summer, and we were talking about this during the summer. Hey, look, the numbers are going up. Our numbers are still above that. I think that the drop in cases is great news, because fewer cases means fewer people getting sick. Fewer people getting sick means fewer people dying, and certainly that means people can perhaps gradually tiptoe towards a more normal life. I just think this is more likely to be a temporary dip before we finally have the final dip of everything leveling off, because these scientists are very concerned about these new strains, the UK strain becoming the dominant strain. They say perhaps by next month. You got the South African strain, which they say might be resistant to the vaccines. You got a Brazilian strain. And then I also have absolutely no trust in the American people or American politicians because the politicians say, hey, look, the numbers are starting to go down. Let's open things up. And that's for like all 50 states, including Michigan. And American people say, hey, look, the numbers went from extremely awfully, historically terrible to just really bad. Therefore, let's go back to living a normal life. Let's go back to taking off our masks. Let's go back to having gatherings. Let's go back to having to opening up bars and everything like that. And let's go breathe Rona on everybody. And then the numbers go back up. So I think this is nice. I think they'll still continue to go down for a little bit because the numbers are going down so rapidly. But and of course we got people getting vaccinated as well. But I think we still got a ways to go because people have shown over the last 9 months that they cannot be trusted, and that was before we had all these new strains.
Yeah, I think you hit on it. People. I think because half of the people out there don't believe in it, so they're tired of it. They don't want to pitch in and do their part. They're just ready to move on and actually ready to say, look, let's try it. Let's try it without doing all these things. So that's not a very good thing, but. Hopefully, even with that, the numbers will continue to decline, and we will just see some kind of steady build-up where they go to 25% to 50% and then who knows? By the time maybe May or June rolls around, we're back, and there's no restrictions. But
now, is that what you're targeting, May or June, for being able to go to games?
You know what? I don't think for me, we can't get the vaccine in my house. I don't think it's going to happen until like August, like at the earliest. So I'm just
wow.
I'm batting down the hatches and hoping that everybody's going to be able to get back out there. When that happens, maybe things can accelerate. But yeah, I'm not planning anything right now for like the Kentucky Derby or anything.
Yeah, I'm not planning any to go to any games. I mean, certainly my goal, I would love to be able to go to a Penn State home game this fall, and there's obviously plenty of opportunity for that to happen. But there's there are just so many unknowns between now and then. Like, how long do the vaccines last? What's up with all these new strains? And one thing that people forget is that the more the virus spreads, the more likely it is to create a lot of new strains. Like, we're talking about 3 new strains right now. If the virus keeps on spreading because we don't have the decency to just stay inside, we don't have the decency to wear a mask, then we could be sitting here in August with 30 strains and only half of them are able to be taken down by a vaccine. And if we've got 30 different strains out there that are more dangerous than the original strain that broke out of Wuhan, then we're going to be in the same position, if not worse. Like, you just wonder, when is it going to be enough? And I think the answer, at least in this country, is never. But what's frustrating is you can see in so many other countries, they have their bleep together and they do have a more normal life, but we just choose to not try to replicate them at all. Like, we used to have a philosophy like, hey, in America we're the best at everything, and now we don't care about that at all.
Yeah, well, maybe with all of that, the cases will still end up declining. Maybe we'll have the 5th chapter on the road, and by June we'll be sitting out at a patio, and we'll be able to.
Buffalo Wild Wings is paying us $1,000 to sit there and do the show.
Yeah, some things like that. I am targeting the Pro Football Hall of Fame in Canton, be on the road, try to do a broadcast from there. I mean, that's in middle or early August.
Early August.
That seems doable. Canton's pretty close. Woodson, Megatron going in the day before. It's a double weekend. It's going to be awesome down there at Canton. I'd like to get down there, and I've never been to the Pro Football Hall of Fame, so that. But it's not like I'm getting my hopes up. But that seems like wow, early August. Maybe we can be out and do something. So,
well, think about
so.
March. Back in March of last year, nobody would have thought, oh, by August we're not going to have this under control. Everybody thought that by August we would have this under control, and It wasn't. And
I
then
thought it was going to burn off in the summer. Remember that?
yes, I do remember that, and it didn't happen. By the time we got to about May, I realized this is going to be going on for a very long time because I could just see the way people were handling it. But you know, I have that same feeling that we're going to have that malaise. We're just not going to care about it, and with all these uncertainties with new strains, it's we're just not making things easy for ourselves.
You are right about that. Beth on Facebook says, we are not out of the woods yet. I'm still being very cautious. Too many strains out there. Yeah, me and you, Beth, cautious. That's the word to take into this. I'm with you.
I will say this. While I don't think we're going to have any fans at Red Wings or Pistons games at all this year for home games,
I thought they let a couple fans in the Red Wings. Is that just family? I thought maybe there's a few. I don't know.
No, I don't think that the governor is allowing fans at games right now. Maybe I'm
wrong.
There
were some. Maybe it was the family. Though.
Yeah, either that or like team employees. But I would assume that by June you'd see some fans at Comerica Park. I'm guessing that.
Well, at Michigan basketball games, the family does get to go to the game, so there is that. But I thought, you know what? I was watching the Blackhawks game last night, and I thought that they said, well, they're allowing some. I thought he said some fans, maybe some people. Maybe that meant,
as long as they have those tarps up there, then that doesn't count for me.
How about the stuffed Little Caesars pizza guys in the back and all that?
Yeah, how about some real people?
How about some real pizza?
Yeah, well, you can get some real pizza after the fifth chapter. And you ready to turn the page to the fifth chapter? Well, the fifth chapter, that takes us to the major wager where we try to win you guys a little bit of money now that we have legal sports betting here in the state of Michigan. Dennis, remind everybody what you picked on Thursday before you give us your pick tonight.
I picked. Was it Tuesday? I picked the Pacers -3 against the Pistons, who were coming off their big victory. Wasn't that against the Nets? I said I wasn't believing in them, so I went with the Pacers, and that was a good bet. Pacers blew them out. So.
Yeah, that was the one win that one game that the Pistons lost last week, and last Thursday I picked Morehead State to cover against Tennessee State, and I was correct about that.
Nice job. Well, tonight I'm going to look to Big Ten basketball. I was looking at that Michigan State-Purdue game, but you know what? I didn't get it in time, so I'm looking tonight in Champaign. Illinois could be the best team of the Big Ten, and they're taking on Northwestern, who's been sliding here, but they're fighting Illini, giving up 13 points. That's too many for me. I like a nice, it's 85-75 Illinois win, but I'll take those 13 points and the Wildcats.
That's not a bad pick. Tonight, I was looking at Purdue versus Michigan State, and I was hemming and hawing back and forth. Should I pick Purdue on the money line? Should I pick Purdue to cover 5.5 points? I saw that Purdue, I believe, was 8-1 on the season at home. Michigan State, I believe, was 2-5. And I was initially going to go with the money line, but then I saw the point guard issues with Foster Loyer. Obviously, he's terrible when he plays, but he also has a shoulder injury, and his status for the game was up in the air. Rocket Watts had the flu, and they might be playing Joshua Langford at point guard. So I said, you know what? I'm going to trust the Purdue Boilermakers. I'm going to take the Boilermakers -5.5. And as of right now, in the second half, about midway through the second half, Purdue has a 47-45 lead. So I need them to, kind of crank things up a little bit. And I need the Michigan State Spartans to go into their little Iowa Hawkeye mode and tank. Oh, there's an update, 49-45. Still not covering, but a little bit better.
Yeah, and I should announce that this weekend I know if you watch any games, that's all you do is inundated now with all these gambling sites. Like, it's amazing how many there are.
It's a lot.
And they're even buying chunk blocks, like an entire half hour. I don't know if you've noticed that. I think it's DraftKings. Like, in there, they're doing an entire half hour infomercial on sports gambling in Michigan. Like, yeah, go on, get on in and everything. I jumped in for the first time, started playing poker for cash online on Sunday, and I had a big first night, and then I was
did you?
all right the second night, and then I thought maybe I'm dominating, and then I kind of took a punch in the face.
You're going to have to take a couple of weeks off to go to Las Vegas for the World Series of Poker.
I just was like, man, I got this every night. I'm cashing every night, and then I got punched in the face last night. But I'm still up overall, and now I'm backing off. Like I played 3 times in the first 48 hours. I was just going. That's all I was doing. I'm backing off. I haven't played tonight, so
Okay.
And I'm up. And I'm up.
Oh, then that's the key. I've got 4 accounts that I've been using for my sports betting, and I'm up in all 4.
Yeah, well, there you go, man. If you're winning and you're on the good side, man, nothing to worry about.
Absolutely.
All right, well, coming up on Thursday, is there anything to worry about for Michigan basketball when it comes to where they sit in the Big Ten and a possible #1 seed and looking at the big dance? We will talk about that. Want to thank Brian Jelinek for running everything on the chat. And for Brian Chapman, I'm Dennis Fithian. Thanks for watching or listening here to the 5th chapter. We will talk with you on Thursday. Good night.
He represents the mitten by way of Penn State. When Chapman gets to talking sports, but people can't wait. He represents the mitten. Be a true EMU, but cut Dennis in the fall, and his veins bleeding blue. They got respect around the state. When that light turns red, so don't sleep on these dudes. Just invite your friends to cut your nap short and tip your cap for and sit back for the 5th chapter. Brian Chapman. Dennis Fithian. When they open their mouths, they spit in the facts, bro. This ain't even optional, man. You just have to tune into YouTube to watch the broadcast or download it to your phone to peep the podcast.